can read the mind of the president. He says, if all the premiers can do like this premier, they can. I'm reading his mind as I was sitting there. And indeed, I agree with you, President. So now, thank you so much, Premier, and thank you so much. We are going back, not the space where we are. We must make a difference. Things must happen. So now, there's a question that always, as we're supporting a girl child, to say, what about a boy child? And it's so painful to that woman who has 4 boys. And when you say, let me try, get a 5th boy, 6th boy, until they are 7, and all boys. And the programs of government, programs of private sector, programs of the society, all of them are channeled to a girl child. But we know what led to that situation, that the past could not give a girl child opportunities. So when we did it, we overdid it to an extent that we left a boy child behind. So now the question erupted as to what about the boy child? So now we're going to get a video who responds to that question. What about a boy child? And technical team, immediately after this video, the messages of support must come. I'm not going to come again on the stage. As we finish with that video, then the messages of
This is a story about boys. Always be the man.
We're rugby players. They're tough kids. We're not dancing around in tutus painting on nails pink.
But in a changing world, boys find themselves left behind with lives that are spiraling out of control.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer girl.
Filled with violence.
This is why women have to constantly live in fear.
I feel like I have to do more.
Decisions which will prove to be fatal at times. But it's time we rethink the path we are setting them on.
Listen up! Tada's not the person that you guys think she is!
A leader uses his brain, not his fists.
What about the boys?
For almost 2 decades, we've had the honor of serving and educating over 1 million high school learners from under-resourced communities nationally in topics including matric maths and science, career guidance, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. Our successful theatres of learning model is the reason why you find yourself in the cinema on a Tuesday morning. As we gather here today, we are united not only by our presence, but by our shared commitment to ushering in a brighter tomorrow. A tomorrow where every individual, irrespective of gender, knows a life of respect, safety, and dignity. Recent reports have painted a grim picture, one that we cannot and must not turn away from. In the last few months, South Africa has witnessed a concerning surge in gender-based violence. 1 out of every 3 women in South Africa have experienced GBV. South Africa has a femicide rate that is 5 times the global average. These aren't just numbers. They are cries for action, screams for intervention, and pleas for justice. Each incident is a stark reminder that our mission is not only timely, but critically urgent. Change starts at grassroots with our youth. Alarmingly, statistics show boys today face myriad challenges, from dropping out of school, engaging in risky behaviors, to high rates of emotional disturbance and suicides. School shootings and stabbings. What do they have in common? Guns and knives, yes, but also boys. Girls aren't pulling the triggers. It's almost always boys. The effects of traditionally defined masculinity and the societal expectation it places on boys presents itself on how we raise boys differently from girls. It starts when we equate emotion with weakness and direct boys to display strength no matter what. They have to be tough, have to be strong, have to be courageous, dominating, no pain, no emotion, with the exception of anger and aggression, and definitely no fear. That men are in charge, which means women are not. That men are superior, women are inferior. That men are strong, women are weak. That women are of less value, property of men, and objects, particularly sexual objects. Growing up, boys are taught idioms such as don't be sissies, man up, and that's so gay. And this has led to a culture in which men have learned to hide their feelings and anxieties, and that they need to constantly prove their masculinity. Boys learn they're expected to play with trucks, tools, weapons, and other masculine toys, while girls stick to dolls, dress up, and play house. Those boys who deviate from the expected behavior may find themselves the subject of ridicule. Traditional masculinity is more comfortable with the image of a boy playing with a toy gun rather than a toy doll, because it's more comfortable seeing a boy hold something that kills rather than something that cries. We live in a culture that teaches boys stoicism over authenticity, dominance over empathy, aggression over assertiveness, and that they don't follow their script, someone will notice and take their man card away. Boys are taught not to seek help, ask for advice, or even ask for directions, because asking for help would suggest a lack of leadership instead of being an acute sign of it. Their behavior is highly monitored, their gender constantly examined for any sign of misstep or mistake. They learn that their connection to mothers will emasculate them, turn them into mama's boys. They become fluent in emotional self-censorship and anesthetized to feelings to avoid getting caught having any. The love is stripped away from them. And as Bell Hooks argues, in the will to change, boys learn that it's better to be feared than to be loved. This conventional set of rules for being a man is outdated and unhealthy. It traps men in an emotional straitjacket. It steers them towards isolation, selfishness, sexism, and sometimes violence. It deadens their soul. And when they act harmfully, the dismissive justification is boys will be boys. Whether it's showing sadness or vulnerability, they are told boys don't cry. Such mindsets rob them of authentic emotional experiences. By discouraging emotions and connection, we raise boys in a system that, combined with societal pressures like economic challenges, can lead to aggression as a form of empowerment. The early experiences of boys inevitably shape the men they become. The problem is not men, but rather the patriarchy, sexism, and constraints of traditional gender norms of young men approaching adulthood. Embracing a more flexible idea of manhood means recognizing that advocating for women's rights doesn't undermine men's rights, that men can form platonic relationships with women, care for children, and express emotions without judgment. It's time to reinvent masculinity. And our initiative, What About the Boys?, proposes a liberating paradigm shift, teaching boys how to inhabit their masculinity responsibly. A social reformer, writer, and statesman, Frederick Douglass said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." For this reason, What About the Boys was designed to help boys redefine masculinity and stop GBV by teaching them to share emotions in healthy ways, accept and connect with others, stand up and speak out against bullying and inequality, and break free from rigid stereotypes. Boys nurtured by wise father figures have the right to emotional expression, diverse hobbies, and forming genuine connections. They should be educated about consent and embracing a spectrum of emotions to foster gender equality and combat violence. The essence of a true man shouldn't be based on dominance or aggression, but on compassion and understanding. We look forward to the day when the measurements of a true man do not depend on the threat of his words, the intimidation of his stature, the power in his eyes, the lust of his thoughts, or the violence in his fists. We advocate for 3 evolved definitions of masculinity. 1, without domination. Another, rooted in mutual respect. And a third, based on equality in all spheres of life. We need a renewed declaration for boys' rights, emphasizing emotional vulnerability, self-expression, and freedom from rigid gender roles. If we educate our sons today, we won't have to protect our daughters tomorrow. To date, we have reached over 30,000 boys nationally, exposing them to relatable storytelling through movies, coupled with our informative, illustrated Good Men Guide workbooks, mentorship, and a free online platform called Prime Stars Digital. Vital to the program's success is the qualitative and quantitative data gathered before and after the program's implementation. The sources for the data included a scenario-based pre-assessment and post-assessment questionnaire, as well as feedback from mentors and focus groups with the boys, teachers, and others. What About the Boys has provided critical insights into boys' understanding and attitudes to a range of topics around gender and masculinity, illustrating how these attitudes can be positively changed with the right guidance and hands-on mentorship. By way of example, our pre-assessment data conducted with participating learners showed that 16% of the boys agreed with the statement that there are times when a woman deserves to be beaten. 30% agreed with the statement that it's okay for a man to hit his girlfriend or wife if she won't have sex with him. And 74% agreed with the statement that a man can have sex with his wife whenever he wants. Post-assessment conducted after the program with the same learners showed that these percentages had dropped dramatically. The change in responses indicate a marked influence on learners' outlook in many areas focused on by the program. Through this comprehensive methodology, we aim to teach boys to be brave enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to be sensitive, and confident enough to connect, thereby moving beyond the societal stereotypes learned since childhood. We need to foster a national movement, freeing all genders from the rigid roles of the past towards the more flexible roles for our future. For masculinity to be compatible with gender justice means coming out of silent complicity and speaking out for the rights of all women and men. Ultimately, boys must positively influence their peers. This will require a deep cultural shift that leads with the understanding that all genders are in the same family boat, that men conduct themselves with a woman in such a way that her gender and theirs could be inverted. It's crucial to create a society that recognizes that when only one gender wins, we all lose. We're in this together. We call on corporate South Africa and the public sector to invest in What About the Boys. Let's raise a nation of good men, good fathers, good partners, good colleagues, good lovers, good managers, good believers, good leaders, and good citizens who can embrace vulnerability, create strong relationships, and live their fullest lives, leaving the world better than the way they found it.
Thank you.
In closing, a special thanks to our
Thank you.
partners, stakeholders,
Thank
who
you.
believed in us and made this possible.
Technical crew, thank
We'd like
you.
to extend our heartfelt gratitude
We
to
say
Professor
thank you.
Shoshana
Thank you.
and Yoshua
We
Pillay
say thank
for
you.
their invaluable contribution. Our sincere appreciation to Minister Machek
Hey,
and the
guys.
Department for Basic Education
We
for your
say thank you.
unwavering support. And to Mr. President, thank you for standing with us, for echoing our concern, and for leading with conviction so that we leave no boy behind.
I knew that it will be like this. We have the president who must give the keynote, but our people allowed, when we say a message of support, it's just 2 minutes, colleagues. In future, let's do that. Our fault, Liko, it's our fault. We really appreciate the message is powerful, it's good. Just that it went over and over as if we didn't invite the president. The president is here, and we didn't invite, it's his meeting with the boys. So it's a dialogue. It's not for us to come and give addresses, it's a dialogue. So now is that time for that dialogue, where the president is having a dialogue with young men. He wants to hear them. We had our own experiences as older people. We disadvantage them by pushing them aside as if they don't live. But now, let me call upon William to come and facilitate. President, I didn't want to facilitate this because I'm old. They say, these older people. So want them to facilitate their own dialogue. William, come forward to come and facilitate the dialogue where young people are going to speak to the president. Let's give
going to jail, etc., they are 90% more likely to commit these crimes as a result of coming from these single-parent households. And then with this, we see that our youth today are going into gangsterism, drugs, etc., because they don't have these father figures that they have in their lives. Now they resort to different father figures or role models that they shouldn't be having, but they have as a result of not having them, looking up to individuals that are negatively impacting our society. So now, with this, what I wanted to ask is, we appreciate about those boys that aren't here, because I think the focus should be on the boys that aren't at events like this, because why can't we have the curriculum is in place to combat?
Thank you, Arabile. You may take your seat. Next up, Mr. President, I'm going to call a grade 11 pupil from Greece. Ask you, Reza, to just keep it to under 2 minutes, please, just for time constraint.
Good day, Mr. President, which emphasizes societal constructs on masculinity. And I want to delve where boy your strategy these are on the way plain and simple. I look up to you as the leader of South Africa, and I want to ask you, I'm Reza Salucci.
Thank you, Reza. The President, I'm going to ask the grade 11 pupil from Greenside High School to come up next, Dylan Harry. And also, Dylan, just keep it under 2 minutes, please.
Mr. President, aside from everyday student struggles that we've all experienced in the past, I wanted to address issues from a more domestic standpoint, things that people outside of home, domestic violence has been in the form of legislation and strategic plans, which has not targeted the root cause of.
I would say I'm a gay person. Is the government gay guys are being abused? You know, cyberbullying. Even the teachers at school, they don't be having gays of gay people. Thank you.
I'm from Oliver Hood Post Secondary School. It's a beautiful school to be that it is lesbian. We have as there are some changes in this country and this world schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pilari. Who is a great turn learner from Taba Jabula Secondary School. Let's give him a round.
Greetings to the house at large. My name is Rorisang Mutsumi and I'm a grade 10 learner from Taba.
Dumelang. Naka lebitso ke Itumetse Kekana. I'm from a school called Oliven Hot Posh. So I don't have a question. You know, I these can be free. We have only school that has gay pride. So ene ka lebaka la seo re leboga Ntate Ronnie Muli, re leboga, he's my teacher though.
Thank you so much, Ki Dumetse. I'm going to open up the floor as well. I've just been told by the Minister of Education, Mam Angie Mutsekga, that we've got a bit of time for 2 more questions for any other person that wants to ask the question. It can be a young boy present in the room at the moment or any one of the stakeholders. Please come up to the microphone. Just 2 more people. I see one hand in the front here and one over there. Please come down, young man. Oh, I'm being told at least 5. Please introduce yourself, young man, and fire your question to the president. He is listening.
Greetings to the House at large. My first question to you, Mr. President, is that many cases of GBV go unreported. People that are being violated can't really express themselves. They can't go and report themselves. Secondly, what types of support systems are available for survivors of GBV? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandile. Who do we have next? Please introduce yourself, the high school you're from.
My name is Raatlile Umulimo Matinya, and I'm from. So then my question is, how are we going to combat the mental health? But then,
thank you, Raatlile.
Question I want to ask to such product. Oh, okay. Okay, like Mr. President, I want to ask you that spread this information to also them in rural areas like Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and all those type of things. That's only my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
And I want to say the LSMs, and we'd love for the president to tell us or inform us how we can actually address the issue of breaking the racial divide.
Thank you so much, Wandile. Pertinent question that. Who do we have up next? Please introduce yourself.
Greetings everyone in the house. My name is Otto Amrola. I'm grade 12 learner from Tabajabula Secondary School. How do you plan to address the disparity in education between rural areas and urban areas in regards to the matters that we spoke about before? Thank you.
Thank you, young man. Who do we have up next? Please introduce yourself before you ask your question to the president.
Okay, before I even say anything, I would love to say, Uti, one of the most annoying things about such big events is housekeeping, having to acknowledge everyone. But then, thanks God, I don't have to do that because it's a conversation between us and the president of school. So cry. A man shouldn't speak about how they feel. So how is the president willing to change that mindset in our societies? I thank you.
Thank you, Mzwakile. Please introduce yourself, young man, before you ask your question to the president.
Oh, okay. My name is Emihle. I'm from Orlando East at Bona Comprehensive High School. My question to the president is that how can we protect ourselves as boys? Because there's this mindset, yoguti, I'm tough, ngisuka elokishini, I don't have a problem with nothing. Like, we are scared as kids at public school. Like, the security sometimes it's weak. There is nothing that we can do about it. So, can we get protection? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emihle. Very important question that. Do we have anyone else? One more. Please introduce yourself, young man.
Good morning. I am reclusive victim lawyer from Parktown Boys High School. My question for the president is that in some countries in Africa, members of the LGBTQ community are being imprisoned. I wanted to ask, what is South Africa's plan in order to have influence on those people? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is that everybody? We've got a few more.
Good day, everybody. I'm Jason McKenzie from CJP, Chris J. Botha. Mr. President, there's a question I want to ask. How do we as young kids and young men make women feel safe, especially in bathrooms? Now that we're having this of unisex toilets, how do we make them feel safe as they enter those toilets? Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Good morning, Mr. President. Morning to all of you in the room. Mr. President, today I want to ask you, seeing as that a room full of young men have been given guidance and hope, how do we give like a whole community of young boys the same message, even though they're not here today?
Thank you
Mr.
for that
President.
question. What's your name, sir?
My name is Cole. I'm in RW FIC Grade 10. Thank you.
Thanks, Cole.
Sunman Food. One last question, Mr. President. Sorry. Okay, Mr. President. Ngizokhuluma ngesiZulu.
Khuluma, bhutam.
Ngizongizwa vele. Okay. Mr. President, how boy go to report a case against a girl that is beating you up and up? Can never be man. Yeah, right. But then must figure when we get to the cops, you like reporting a cut, and then we just turn into love stocks. How are you planning on solving that? Thank you.
Siyabonga Tabang. Thank you so much. Mr. President, these are all pertinent questions. In fact, I'm one of the mentors that mentors these young men, and we spend Saturdays with them around the country. So far, about 30,000 boys that we've reached and have been able to engage with since the program started in 2022, and is to take care of that you have don't agree. And there's a list of all of these questions in the questionnaire put together and developed by Prime Stars. And the response that we get from young men, obviously, is the fact that there's a soft hand that goes with the raising of a young girl child, but it's a lot harder for the young boys, right? We tell the boys, as Utabang was saying, let me say it in isiZulu, like, indoda ikhali, monna ha alle, awuskala umshimani, man up, things like that. So this very important meeting with you, Mr. President, was to try and address all of that and have the boys in their voice ask you those questions. So would you please respond, Mr. President? And before that, obviously, I need to hand you back to the Deputy Chairperson. Deputy Minister, ontshwarele seke. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William. I wish I had your voice. I love it. William Lehong from Metro FM. Wow. And now I see the criteria to be, they will hire me there. Minister, let me invite you to come and sweep.
No, thank you very much, Program Director. Those are all the colleagues that are here. But thank you most sincerely for coming to join us. Because this is one of our most important programs as a sector. And to the young people that are here, after releasing the president, we're going to continue to engage with you. Okay? So the struggle continues. And President, this is a very important program for us, especially having the opportunity of interacting with the young people. I'll just give you two, because even as a sector, we gain a lot from interacting with young people. I recently went to Katlehong on comprehensive sexual and unplanned and unwanted pregnancies. And typical of me, old mommy said, start with abstention to say, don't get into early sex and all sorts of things. Just look, the other interaction, speaker number one was saying, no, Minister, all the things you raise are in the life sciences book. Our problem is when we go to clinics, we get judged by nurses. Speaker number two, when we go to clinics, they report us to our parents. And I sat back and said, age gap. So I'm talking about stage 1 abstention. People are on stage 3. So they are experimenting. So I'm not talking, but we're not in the same wavelength. And it helped me because then I had to go to Dr. Pasha to say, hey, colleague, get out of touch. People are experimenting. I said, don't experiment. The message from 5 speakers, one by one, was that they're experimenting. So, which means they didn't understand where they are. And it helped me. Then I went to Pasha to say, let's really look at youth-friendly clinics. That's partly why we're here, youth-friendly venues, so that we're in touch with it. So what a generation gap. But the other one, I also went to Mami Lodi with also on unplanned and unwanted pregnancies. And there was this pretty little girl with a very beautiful demeanor. And again, I think the old me is judging. I said to her, but Manaka, how did you get here? If I knew, we want you, make the change. You also want to help me. So I'm going to invite that to enlighten us. They will continue after the president leaves. I'm from here. It used to be Greenfields here in Soweto. He was a student of the apartheid study. And it's going to be difficult. Lawyer. I said to presidents, and she's our product.
Conosecchio con rispetto, io mi inchino e mi profondo a un sapiente sì perfetto, a un sapiente sì perfetto, che le qual non v'è nel mondo e le quale non verrà, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, per la gran bestialità. Conosecchio e con rispetto io mi inchino e mi profondo a un sapiente sì perfetto, che le qual non v'è nel mondo e le quale non verrà, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, per la gran bestialità, e le quale non verrà, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, per la gran bestialità, e le quale non verrà, e le quale non verrà. Con ossequio, con rispetto, io mi inchino e mi profondo a un sapiente sì perfetto, a un sapiente sì perfetto, che le qual non v'è nel mondo e le quale non verrà, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, per la gran bestialità. Io mi inchino l'ignoranza e le quale non verrà, per la gran bestialità, e le quale non verrà. Io mi inchino e mi profondo a un sapiente sì perfetto, che le qual non v'è nel mondo, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, e le quale non verrà, per la gran bestialità, e le quale non verrà, per l'orgoglio e l'ignoranza, per la gran bestialità, 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 e le quale non verrà, e le quale non verrà, non verrà, non verrà.
Gashaya in Fuku, Gashaya in Fonga, Gashaya in Fuku, Kukobe Sikwaka, Gakulumis in Fonga mine, Iteget in Saba. iklabu kukhiqika imiqemane lone mandla kasozele lone nkhana ketela pha agede ngidomkhomba abantu ngiyayishaya indvuku ngayifunza kushiyabula sesikwe ngayifunza kumnyaka mengutseni nganikwa ngumjingi lomabhanga longangelutsi lwemshayelo bomlobo kazana bomgayina bombovana yabusiswa ngumadlenya yabusiswa ngumhlaka yabusiswa ngumavuba lanikafika izijula ngiliqhawele nfukumine ngiliqhawele nfukumine ngiliqhawele nfukumine ngiliqhawele nfukumine yakanjwa ngomadlenya bomdlaka navika izijula ngithi ngubani lonembango ngubani lobangako angakadla ngifile hayi ngisaphila ngawuyatiyenga ngawuyatilutsa angaphambana nemvula ayeka goqa nyawo wawuyephi nangini kwale nanfuku wawuyephi nakanjwa le nanfuku nayikanjwa ngomadlenya bomdlaka navika izijula.
Oh, yeah, I must take that. Oh, yes. Then I must be photographed. If you are expecting me to do a soprano, not today. What a joy to be here. Thank you very much, Program Director, CEO of the program, Minister of Basic Education, Minister Enjimutsecha, the Premier of our province here in Gauteng, Premier Panyaza Lesufi, the Junior Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Arabile Mapiri, and representatives of civil society, and indeed Mr. Martin Sweet, the leader and the head of Prime Stars. And ladies and gentlemen, in a bioscope, I wanted to sit right at the back there, but they put me in the front seat. And it's really wonderful, and thank you very much to meet with all of you, people, entrepreneurs and tech gurus, you name it. It's wonderful to have this opportunity. Some of you have asked important that we should, and today is clear proof of why we as one may ask why Is there a focus on women, on Women's Month? Receive a head of state at the Union buildings and great grand. Why is there so much focus on women's empowerment? The answer is a straightforward one. There is a crisis enough. We don't pay attention to it about the way South African men destroy who we are as a people and as a nation. This crisis is violence against women and girls, violence that we as men perpetrate violence against women in the way we treat them, be it at home and sexually, and we even kill them and rape them. And in the workplace, we push them to the back. We don't give them opportunities to search to the full. So this is a scourge that I described as a pandemic, even as we were going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we need men, therefore, men to get together to bring this to an end. We are encouraged that we have today with us here young men from different parts of our country, largely in Gauteng, but with what I heard, the questions coming through, some of you come from various parts of our country. Young men who have stood up and said, yes, we want to be part of bringing about change. We want to be better men. And I love the slogan that we must raise a nation of good men. Yes, we want to show by our words as well as by our deeds that we respect women, and that as we are gathered here, we want to treat them as equals. And I want to thank you for taking this important step towards making our country a better place for all its people. Now, this young men's dialogue is very important for me, and I know you will continue after I have left. But you've thrown up to 16 questions at me, and I will, during the course of my input, address quite a number of the issues and questions that you have raised. To end gender-based violence, we must focus on prevention. The march, that was 9, the prospect of having women sleeping at the Union buildings, and I got up and I went at night. And they told me their full account, reading their human summit, which summit was quite, some of them, but came up with the National Strategic Plan. And one of the key issues in that strategic plan is that we must stop this violence even before what we conversation, and it is inculcated from the societal point of view and the environment that we live in, that men to us have to those questions here address, which is the idea that being a man means you must so much have in there and begin your relationship. Mother will never be a relationship where you want to dominate and demean. You will never, and your relations that type, the women in our sisters, and see whether we do want to demean the other person. We must talk about the influence of culture, yes, and media depictions of men and women, because media also plays a key role. What about the boys? This brings together, yes, government, and I'm pleased that as government we've taken it so seriously and are going to be doing much more as you have challenged us and asked us questions. And I'm grateful that Minister Montega, Department or the Ministry of Basic Education, is taking this so seriously. But we are also pleased that civil society, like organizations like Prime Stars and all the many others that are depicted here, are going to come or are coming to the party. Academia, social society, and various other social stakeholders want to collaborate towards raising a good nation of good men. And what we say that is correct to us that must not be left behind. And Deputy Minister Mhaule was right. We've tended to focus on women and the girls and we found that we had left the boys behind. And we're paying more and more attention. And it even happens in households. Even my daughters have said, but Dad, you seem to be focusing more on us and seeking to protect us all the time. What about the boys? And I've said, yeah, I do pay attention. And then they said, but you're paying more attention on us, which is the truth. Which is the truth. So we must therefore change societal approach to focusing on the boys as well, because they must be part of our journey towards a South Africa free of gender-based violence and free of these very terrible attitudes towards women. They must be encouraged and supported to be change makers in society. You face a lot of pressure as young men in the family, in relationships, with your friends at school. The peer pressure is quite intense, where they want you to be the man. Ube ubra, ubonakalayo, ukuthi, uyisiqhwaga futhi, and when ayikho into oyisabayo. And in South Africa today, black men are most vulnerable to violence as well. Young men and boys are vulnerable to being recruited into gangs such as drugs and being part of criminal activities. Young men of this country are being made into men before their time, before they even enjoy being young men. They are already being dragged into activities and into behaviors that make them men. You must face the pressure from your friends to become sexually active even before you are ready to do so, because this is seen as the real thing that a man must do. And Minister is right. There are also pressures on women, young women, and therefore they run to clinics, and then the clinic system, or the health system, then puts more pressures on them. Worse yet, engaging in unsafe sex practices is also seen as being more manly. And I must say that our HIV has been the case for the longest of time, that men must participate in unsafe sex so that they must be seen to be the real men. And of course, the spread of AIDS, you've gone through young men need more and more of this, and the minister later areas. What about, of course, migrant labor system absentee to leave their places with as many as those that I've talked about, fathers not being there. To young girls, with all of you, important key are the pressure on, they have a family, you too, that is going to continue after I have left. You also, as young men, accept rejection. Those of you very accepted that your that I approach. Yes, these are some women and girls you want your dick held. It's not a problem. You were at a new generation coming from you, the new generation, and also I feel talking around very in general and change. I feel talking around very in general and change in discussion about issues in engage where you got their feelings. Easier to talk about how we need to share each other's lives together and collaborate more. The focus of your program is to reimagine and reinvent masculinities in a sensitive manner, in a respectful manner. And it is in the end about working with young men and boys through theaters of learning to influence how they view themselves and the kinds of men that they want to grow into being. Now, as government, as civil society, And as business, we should become more and more committed to supporting you in your journey to become better than you are. And you do right to challenge us. The questions that you've posed are challenging questions, and you do well by asking those questions directly to us. And here I thank the Department of Basic Education for being willing, prepared, and have a duty to lead the charge in this regard. And in thanking all of you for participating, I think it is a huge step that you have already taken. But I want to highlight just 10 issues. 10 issues about the role or behavior of young boys towards women and how we can begin to bring about influence, positive influence, so that all of us as men and as young boys realize how we can change our own behavior and how we can discard what we were taught at the home, what we were taught where we grew up, and also what we were taught through our cultural norms in terms of being better young men and better citizens. The first one in my book is that there must be respect and equality. Young boys should be taught and should know that they need to respect women as equals and recognize their rights, their feelings, and their perspectives. And I bring once again the imagery of your mother, because if we bring the imagery of your mother, female, woman in your life, and you then transpose that to your relationships with other women that you come across, your relationship with your mother is based on total respect. It is based on recognizing that, yes, she is your mother, you respect her feelings, you respect her perspectives. I have now taken to watching this soapy, Shaka Ilembe. And I am just in awe of how Ushaka Ilembe respected his mother and how he treated his mother and how he wanted to protect his mother at all times, and how even as his mother was being demeaned and degraded, he took it upon himself that I am going to wipe out the suffering and the travails that you are going through. And what it taught me is that if men can treat the women in their lives with respect, with recognition of equality, we will then go a long way. When you look at a woman, you should say, there's no difference between me and her. We are equal. We are equal citizens, and I must treat her with respect, just as I respect everyone else. And the second point for me is empathy. Understanding and empathizing with the experiences of women will help us as men and as boys become compassionate and supportive individuals. Being able to empathize, to have full understanding of the condition that women have. To understand that even things like once a month, a woman has to go through a period that is difficult and challenging for her, and empathize and understand and say, yes, I understand. These were things that were never talked about in the past. They were never talked about, and we need as men to empathize and to understand. It is when we understand, when you understand the other person's viewpoint, when you understand the other person's condition, that your respect and your recognition of them then grows. The third one is to have boundaries. As men, we must know that we have boundaries. It's essential for young boys to understand and respect personal boundaries, recognizing that consent, even as a woman says head, hey, is it that you cannot make bum, and some of it doing all those things. When you look at a woman and say, wow, hey, your breasts are like this and your eye limits, because, and we must also challenge stereotypes. Boys should be and bias traditional gender roles. Whereas some of you were saying, yes, the normal trend and the cultural tradition is that the woman must be the one who tends for the men all the time. That is a cultural and traditional stereotype that we must challenge. And I'm glad that you, young men who are here, young boys, you are beginning to do that. The education that is being culcated to you or being offered to you at your schools is such that you will have the strength, the intellectual rigor to be able to challenge those. And you have to make a stand against the fifth one, against misogyny. Boys must be educated about the negative impacts of misogyny and attitudes, and we must encourage you to stand up against them, to look at women as objects that men should use, to look at women as objects of sex, to look at women as people that you can oppress, undermine, and demean. It cannot be. We are all equal citizens, and our constitution dictates that we should have that approach. And the sixth one for me is open communication. Boys must be encouraged to communicate openly about your feelings. You must be able to say, I feel depressed for this and that reason, and we need to get into that mode of even crying, because even crying is something that does not get done. And sometimes we don't want to cry even when a situation demands that you should excel behaviors to habits, because reading about how his and later men came from that. So as men, as you grow up, it's important for you to know model, because those other people in society, they watch you. And as they watch you, they try to model themselves against you. So it's important that we as men, particularly as fathers, we should become good role models to our children, particularly our sons. Because when they see us picking up our hands against the mothers of their own children, then they think that this is the done thing. This is something that we can do. The eighth one is to have a partnership relationship. You must view women, as young boys, view women as your partners in various life activities, from friendships, partner that you may know a lot better. We should be educated. We should be able to delve into issues that increase our understanding about gender relations. And this is where I will, talk a little bit more about reading. It's important to read. For you as young men, delve into acquiring knowledge. And part of that knowledge should be about the relations that you need to build, particularly with women. And I often ask young people, how often do they read? And quite often I find that many people do not read at all. And when I was 16, I already had a bit of a library at my home. And I say, it's important to be reading all the time. I had a friend, I don't know whether she's here today, who used to tell me, who I know used to read about 52 books a year. 52 books. And I often ask people, how many books do you read in a year? 30, nobody raises their hand. 20, nobody. And quite often, some people become honest and I say, how many of you have not read a book this year? They raise their hand. But soon thereafter, I've met some of them later who say, you know, President, you encouraged me to start reading. I had a friend who passed away who, when I told him this story, came and whispered to me and said, you know, my good friend, I had not read a book for 30 years. Through telling me the story you tell young people, I have now started reading. And I've been to a bookstore and I'm now reading every day. So education then helps to help you change these relations. And the last one is the promotion of positive masculinity, where you yourself display positive masculinity, and it also means that you do not have what we call toxic masculinity. You are able to show your own vulnerability, and you encourage other men around you to show positive masculinity and to be there, to be collaborative, to be supportive towards women. In essence, this is what I believe young men, young boys should begin to inculcate in their heads. Because if we can embrace some of these 10 points, we will then be able to see a change. And what about the boys who are not here? Very good question by Arabile. The boys who are not here are boys that we need to reach out to. And I've often said that what we need to do is to have this type of movement. What about the boys type of movement? And spread it around the country. Martin Sweet has spoken about that we want everyone, all the key role players to support us as we go around the country to spread this message. Yes, in the rural areas, yes, in the townships, reach out as much as possible. I want to be in a big stadium where a number of you can come and talk about the issues about boys and the issues against gender-based violence. I have been saying I want that type of massive occasion, and it should be spread around the country. It should not only be in one setting. So we will be working more closely at programs that we need, and that is quite negative. And over our, we continue. The other day, this organization which is called Africa Fact Check, and Africa Fact Check checked, and it's come down to about 7%. But that does not mean absolute poverty. There is still quite a great deal of unacceptable poverty in our country. But many of the programs that we have embarked upon have been aimed at reducing poverty, and we will continue to do that, because reducing poverty and taking people out of poverty is one of our key areas of focus. So we will continue to do so, because reducing poverty has other wonderful social side effects, which is reducing gender-based violence and this toxic masculinity. Darlene Harry says, domestic violence. What are we going to do to address domestic violence? Domestic violence is a societal problem. And we've been saying we need to get organized as communities. We need to get organized because domestic violence takes place in the household, in the most private setting that we all live in. And of course, sometimes it spills out when the woman who has been abused either runs out of the home, goes to the police station, and that is where we need to give her safety and we need to give her comfort. But reducing domestic violence also means that we've got to raise the level of consciousness amongst men. That in order for you to be a man does not mean that you've got to be raising your hand against women. Tabangwenya openly says, I am gay. What are we doing to accommodate people who are gay? And take it, you mean the LGBTQI plus community. Our government has taken enormous strides, has made enormous strides in recognizing the LGBTQI plus community to make sure that they are recognized, they have rights, and they are not discriminated. And this we took as a conscious decision when we drafted our constitution. And we were clear in saying there is freedom of sexual orientation in South Africa. Now, one of you says, doesn't happen in the rest of the continent. And yes, that is true. And what are we doing about it? There's a great deal that we are doing about it, because this is a challenge that many societies have in the world. But the world is changing. The world is becoming more and more aware that there needs to be respect for human rights. You might recall that some 100 years ago or so, there was still slavery. People's rights were not recognized. People were kept in slavery. That has changed. Racism was the order of the day just until 30 years ago. And so because we are challenging that, we're talking about it, and that is going to bring about the change. So I do believe that even when a number of countries have not yet grasped the nettle on the issue of respecting people who have a different sexual orientation, they will. And the discussions and the level of consciousness that is being raised continues. So that is an ongoing challenge, program, and struggle that we must get involved in. Piladi says he's in a supportive schools. How can we change the policies of schools that don't accept LGBTQI+? Minister is remaining and she will also address that. It's a societal issue and we need to be changing minds. We need to be raising levels of consciousness. It's an ongoing challenge and struggle. May not happen overnight, but we have great principles, great policies that will be able to get this to be overall accepted all round. We must never stop, we must never tire to raise that level of consciousness. Rory Sang Mutumi says, how will you support public school choices? I didn't quite understand the question, but of course we support the choices that are made in public schools for what is positive. And the minister can talk about that as well. Itumetsi Ekana says that they have freedom and all of us to exit out of this violence that go in the bedroom and are often between intimate partners. They are the ones who perpetrates are reported. Our spaces in the port and the trauma, women and more so does not get the of young men, of disability, mental health, the mental state, pay closer attention. And Dando says, yes, children in rural areas, I think I addressed that. The one who produced this film, didn't catch the name, how do we close the gaps in the LSM and breaking the racial divide? Racial divide remains there, and often say that the shadow of our past still casts on us as we move forward. That shadow is still there with us. Racial attitudes are still there with us. And we need to know that we've got to continue engaging in a struggle. It's like a fault line. You've got to continue closing that fault line all the time because it can always erupt. And that gap can always be a gaping gap. So we must process in education is how to close that gap. But the original gap was to close the racial better educate the money that we buy, and that is aimed between rural and urban as well. So we focus on all three. I think I heard this. How will the president change approach on men not crying? I can make them cry. I'll try. I'll try to make men cry a bit more. But it's part of what I've been saying. How will we address the issues of toughness and fear? Yes, I did touch on that we want our schools, particularly for those who may feel vulnerable at schools, not to have any fear. And of course, we want our schools to be centers where people feel safe. Safe not only from criminality, but also safe from being ostracized. And as discrimination against gays, I think I have addressed this. Yes, there is, and we do right that these are basic rights that we hold to very dearly. And even as we meet our South Africa, we make women feel safe. That's a very, any of the know that young respect for them, fear. And women should no longer fear that is the case. I remember one university, Minister Motshekga, where I went to in the Eastern Cape, they used to have a lot of incidents of gender-based violence, including the brutal killing of young women in the university precinct. And the university started the men's dialogues and took the men student body and did precisely what we are doing today, spoke to men, got them to stand up, the young students to stand up, to speak openly about gender-based violence and attitude of men to women. When I went to that university, the princess walk around on doing so that all together. I standing prime to prevent, to engage women, and then it should be tears at this point, this type of national dialogue as you have suggested. And then go to police also will be trained to be sensitive, whether it's a man or coming to, just as we are doing today. Premier and I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Applause. Thank you so much. I said we are privileged than those who are ululating